You're listening to a special bonus episode of The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, hockey fans. Welcome to my 2020 NHL free agency breakdown here on the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm going to go team by team, recapping what they did in free agency. Yes, that includes trades, and this is going to be a lot of fun. I didn't like skipping over all the hockey stories, but this was the best way to do it. If I did it each day, then the shows would have been really long, and Friday's show wouldn't have been posted until Saturday at 3 a.m. So, that couldn't happen. This is the better way to do it. And plus, I like going team by team. You get more of a global feel of the league, as opposed to just talking about individual moves here and there. So I'll go alphabetically. That means I'm going to start with the Anaheim Ducks. They made a couple big moves. They signed Kevin Shattenkirk and Derek Grant. I gotta say, I like the moves. Shattenkirk failed with the Rangers. He rebuilt his value with the Lightning. Played a key role in their Stanley Cup run. Had 34 points in 70 games. He signed a prove-it deal with the Lightning. He proved his value. And now he's parlayed it into a nice payday with the Ducks. And I like the idea of him on that top four. I don't like the Ducks' defense. Outside of Cam Fowler and Hampus Lindholm, there's no one on their blue line who I like, so this goes a long way towards shoring that up. They still have some work to do, but that's a good first step. They'll probably look to just work with the pieces they have. I don't see them going crazy for a guy like Pietrangelo or someone like that. They'll just try to coach the guys who they have up. And good luck. It's possible it can work, but I'm skeptical. The bottom half of their defense, I'm not crazy about. And by the way, what a weird free agency. Remember when I said that every big NHL free agent would be off the board by now? That hasn't happened. We still don't know where Pietrangelo is going to go. We still don't know where Mike Hoffman's going to go. We still don't know where, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is going to go. Very strange. But back to the Ducks. Derek Grant spent parts of 3 seasons with the Ducks. Knows the city very well. Fits in their system. I think he'll be great on their fourth line. He had 25 points in 56 games last year for the Ducks and Flyers. In fact, he may even be a third liner for him. I wouldn't mind that. He scored 15 goals last year. You could put a guy like that on the third line. With Sam Steele and Troy Terry, that could work. They also traded Eric Goodbranson to the Senators for a 5th rounder in the NHL draft next year, not the one that just happened. It's a good move to get something for Goodbranson. I'm not crazy about him. Like I said, the Ducks have some work to do if they want to make it back into the playoffs, but these moves will help. There's no question about that. Moving on now to the Arizona Coyotes. They made a couple depth moves in bringing in Tyler Pitlick and Johan Larsson. Pitlick and Larsson are similar players. Solid fourth liners. They'll both hover at around 20 points a year. They play a good defensive game. They're both solid fourth liners. There's really not much more I can say. The Coyotes didn't overpay them. I think Rick Tocchet will like them. These moves are good, but obviously they don't replace Taylor Hall. Moving on now to the Boston Bruins. They saw Torrey Krug leave for the Blues, and in response, they signed Craig Smith. Gotta say, I don't know how well Smith is going to do in replacing Krug, seeing as though Krug is a defenseman and Smith is a winger. I didn't think the Bruins needed to add another forward, but hey, Craig Smith is a good hockey player. Really liked him in Nashville, did a good job with Peter Laviolette. He had 31 points in 69 games last year. He's a proven goal scorer. Plays a really good two-way game. I think he's a good player. I'm just confused as to the fit. The Bruins didn't need to add another forward. They need to shore up their defense. Outside of Charlie McAvoy, there's no one on their blue line that scares me. They're relying on a lot of young guns. Brandon Carlo, Connor Clifton, Jeremy Lawson. I'm sure I butchered that name. Look, the Bruins will be fine. They'll make the playoffs. I just don't think they'll do much when they're there. Unless they make a trade for Oliver Ekman-Larsson, which has been rumored, but nothing's official yet. They're in a tough spot. That brings us to the most surprising team of free agency, the Buffalo Sabres. Raise your hand if you thought they were going to be the team to sign Taylor Hall. Now put it down because you're full of it. There's no way you thought Taylor Hall was going to go to Buffalo. Why didn't any other team do this? If Hall was willing to take a short-term deal, why wasn't every single NHL team in on him? We all know how great Taylor Hall is. You don't need me to tell you that. He's a point-a-game player. He's a former Hart Trophy winner. But the fact that the Sabres were able to sign him, I mean, that is a coup of epic proportions. Fantastic move by the Sabres. There were rumors that they were operating under an internal salary cap. Obviously, that's not true now. They also made a good move in adding Cody Eakin, a guy who had a down year last year, but has had good years in the past, and I like the idea of him on the third line. And bringing back Brandon Montour was a really good move. But it pales in comparison to Hall. This is without question the steal of the offseason. You cannot say enough good things about this move. That brings us to the Calgary Flames. They had a solid playoff run. I didn't think they played great, but they weren't terrible. They knew they needed to reinforce their team if they want to continue their upward trajectory. And they couldn't have done much better than what they did, replacing Cam Talbot and TJ Brody with Jacob Markstrom and Chris Tanev is perfect. Look, Brody's a better offensive defenseman than Tanev, but the Flames already have offensive defensemen. Mark Giordano, Rasmus Anderson, Noah Hannafin. They need a defensive defenseman. Chris Tanev fits their team perfectly. And with the signing of Markstrom, this ends their 1A, 1B setup that they had with Rittich and Talbot. David Rittich is okay. He's not great. Cam Talbot is good. I think he gets a bad rap. But Jacob Markstrom is a million times better than him. Markstrom was the best goalie in free agency. Went 23-16-4 with a .918 save percentage and a .275 goals against last year for the Canucks. He finished 4th in Vezina Trophy voting last year. 15th in Hart Trophy voting. Played well in the playoffs. The Flames are set up really well for the future. Rittich is better as a backup. Markstrom's going to play 50 to 55 games. Rittich will play the rest. That's a perfect setup. Tanev fits the makeup of their team better than Brody. These are two great moves for the Flames, and as it stands right now, I think we'll see them in at least, the Western Conference Finals. Wouldn't surprise me if they went further. The Carolina Hurricanes had a pretty quiet open to free agency. They only made one big move, but it was a good one. They got younger on their third line in replacing Justin Williams with Jesper Fast. Nothing against Williams. Had a really good career. Won a Conn Smythe Trophy. 3-time Stanley Cup winner. Really good career, but he's at the end of the line. He's 39 years old. Fast is younger. He's 28 years old. Put together some good seasons for the Rangers. Was never great, but the Hurricanes don't need him to be great. They just need him to be a third liner. And I think he'll fill that role perfectly. I like this move for the Hurricanes. 3 years at $6 million is very fair for him. It makes a ton of sense. The Blackhawks and Avalanche didn't do much except combine for a pretty notable trade. The Blackhawks traded Brandon Saad and Dennis Gilbert to the Avalanche for Nikita Zadorov and Anton Lindholm. The Blackhawks are getting a lot younger here. I mean, this signals that they are serious about a rebuild. Both Zadorov and Lindholm are 25 years old. And truthfully, they haven't shown much in the NHL. I don't think either one of them are going to be the next Duncan Keith or anything. And Brandon Saad is a good player. Good goal scorer. Really good two-way game. The Avalanche got a lot better here. They easily win this trade. Saad fits in perfectly on their top six. Dennis Gilbert seems like he has some potential. I don't know too much about him. but it seems like he can be a solid 7th defenseman for the Avalanche. They easily won this trade, and the Blackhawks are going to have a rough go of things in the near future. It's going to be a tough rebuild. I know their stars don't like it. They may have to trade guys like Kane and Taves and Keith. It's going to be a rough few seasons. There's no question about that. Moving on now to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And they've had a weird offseason. They've completely changed around their defense. They traded Ryan Murray for a 5th rounder in the next NHL draft. They traded Marcus Nudivara. Okay, fine. You know, I don't mind getting rid of those 2 guys. They weren't setting the world on fire. Remember when Garth Snow wanted to trade his whole draft so he could move up to take Ryan Murray? Good times. Good times. Then the Blue Jackets made a big trade with the Canadiens. They traded Josh Anderson for Max Domi and a 3rd-round pick in the NHL draft that just happened. That was a big win for the Blue Jackets. Domi's a durable player, puts up 50 points a season. Anderson got hurt last year. He was going to be due a ton of money. The Canadiens gave it to him. The Blue Jackets didn't want to. They wanted to pay Domi instead. Good for him. I hope he finds a home in Columbus. I can live with all that. But then they replaced Alexander Wenberg with Mikko Koivu. On what planet is Koivu that much better than Wenberg? I understand that Wenberg didn't have the impact that everyone wanted him to have in Columbus, but is Koivu that much better than him? Okay, fine. Veteran presence. I understand that. If that's what they were going for, fine. But I'd have rather they kept Wenberg. I'm not crazy about what the Blue Jackets did this offseason. The Domi trade they won. No question about that. But they gutted their defense. They now have a big black hole there. And Mikko Koivu isn't that much better than Alexander Wenberg. Veteran presence doesn't negate the fact that you got older and only slightly better. And even then, it's not even that much. It's like .01. If I had to grade their offseason, I would say C-. I'll skip over the Dallas Stars. All they did was re-sign a couple people who they had to re-sign, in Anton Khudobin and Radek Faksa. Good moves. No complaints there. They had to do it. But that brings us to the Detroit Red Wings. And they had an interesting offseason so far. They let Jimmy Howard walk, a guy who's been there for a long time, and they replaced him with Thomas Greiss, a guy who can still play. As an Islander fan, I can tell you that. He's not a money goalie, but that's okay, because the Red Wings aren't going to be making the playoffs anytime soon. I like the idea of him and Jonathan Bernier. That should be okay. Troy Stecher is a good young defenseman. The Red Wings let a couple older players walk in Jonathan Erickson and Trevor Daley. Stecher makes perfect sense. But bringing in Vladislav Nemesnikov was a fantastic move. Nemesnikov has struggled to find a home in his young NHL career. Started in Tampa, went to the Rangers, then went to the Senators, then the Avalanche. But you know what? The guy can still play. Last year, 31 points in 65 games. He's 27 years old. He scored 17 goals last year. I think it's a great fit for him with the Red Wings. He'll get a chance to play a lot. If he makes some mistakes, it's okay. It's not like the Red Wings are playing for anything meaningful anyway. I love this offseason for the Red Wings. Steve Yzerman is doing the right thing. He brought in some really good hockey players. The Red Wings are on the right track here. I promise you. That brings us now to the Edmonton Oilers. And I gotta say, I don't understand the heat that they're getting. Yes, they haven't re-signed Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. That's dreadful. Alright, they need to lock him up. I understand they're in cap hell, but they have to find a way to lock him up. He is invaluable to the Oilers. McDavid and Draisaitl can't do it all themselves. But the moves that they made, bringing in Tyson Barrie and Kyle Turris, and re-signing Mike Smith, I thought those were good moves. Tyson Barrie is a good defenseman. Not great. Certainly didn't live up to expectations in Toronto, but I think he'll do a really good job with the Oilers. He doesn't need to be their best defenseman. He can let Darnell Nurse be their best defenseman. Or Oscar Klefbom, depending on what happens with him. I really think Barry's going to do a good job in Edmonton. And Kyle Turris is a skilled offensive player. I think he'll fit in really well on their third line. At the end of the day, someone other than McDavid and Draisaitl need to score points. It's just that simple. Turris can do that. The biggest issue that some people had was bringing back Mike Smith. And I understand that Smith wasn't great last year for the Oilers, but I didn't think he was dreadful. Granted, I didn't see him every game, but from what I saw, I thought he was solid. I understand the one game he played in the playoffs, he was dreadful. We're not going to bring that up. Okay? Atrocious. I'm with you there. But I thought he was solid in that 1A, 1B setup with Koskinen. At the end of the day, the Oilers weren't going to get Jacob Markstrom. They didn't have the cap space for it. They still have to find a way to bring Nugent-Hopkins back. This is the best the Oilers can do with their limited resources. I don't think they had a bad offseason. If they lose Nugent-Hopkins, dreadful offseason. He's invaluable to them. But assuming they bring him back, this is a good offseason. That brings us to the Florida Panthers. As it stands right now, there are reports saying that they're going to trade for Nate Schmidt to help the Golden Knights clear room so they can bring in Alex Pietrangelo. At the time I'm recording this, that is not finalized. When it's finalized, I'll talk about it on a regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show. But as of this moment, I can't talk about it. It's not official. So I can only talk about the Panthers bringing in Radko Gudas, Alexander Wenberg, and Carter Verhaeghe. I gotta say, they're all good moves. I'd have liked the Panthers to bring back Mike Hoffman and Evgeny Dadonov, but if that wasn't doable, these guys are solid replacements. Gudas will help shore up a decent Panthers defense. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Outside of Yandel and Ekblad, they don't have anyone that scares me. Gudas will help. Physical player. Plays a good two-way game. He's better offensively than people give him credit for. Last year, 15 points in 63 games. That's solid. I like that. Alexander Wenberg, I think a change of scenery could do him a lot of good. It seems like he's going to be asked to fill a big role for the Panthers on their top six. I'm not sure how that's going to go. But I don't think Wenberg will be bad. I think you can expect 40 points from him in that role. It's not the worst situation in the world. And Carter Verhaeghe came up this year and played well. 13 points in 52 games. I liked what he did in the playoffs. Nothing wrong with bringing in those guys. The Panthers should have tried harder to bring back Hoffman and Dadonov, but again, if they had their heart set on testing free agency, there's not much you can do. The Panthers did make a big trade, though, in sending Josh Brown to the Senators for a 4th-round pick in this past NHL draft. I thought that was a great trade for the Panthers. Brown, in the little bit that I saw him, didn't impress me. He only had 8 points in 56 games. I thought the Panthers did a good job in getting something for someone who I don't think has a long future in this league ahead of him. The LA Kings didn't do much except trade for Olli Maatta. They traded a guy by the name of Brad Morrison for him. I don't know anything about Morrison, but I do know something about Maatta. I like Maatta. I liked him with the Penguins. I thought he had a good season last year for the Blackhawks. Terrible trade for the Blackhawks in giving him away. Good move for the Kings. They need all the help they can get. The Minnesota Wild brought in Cam Talbot. He's a million times better than Alex Stalock. The Wild rode Stalock as much as they could, and Talbot will help them a lot. If they really want to make a go of this thing, Talbot's going to help them out. As for their trades, that's where they made the biggest headlines. They traded Ryan Donato to the Sharks for a 3rd rounder in this coming NHL draft. I didn't like that trade. I like Donato. I think he's a good goal scorer. And I really thought he could have helped the Wild. They traded Devan Dubnyk. That was a great move. Dubnyk did not play well for the Wild at all. I'm talking this year. In years past, he was really, really good. Last year, laid a major egg. And they also traded Luke Kunin and a 3rd rounder in this past NHL draft for Nick Bonino and a 2nd and a 4th in this past NHL draft. I gotta say, I don't understand this trade. I think Kunin is going to be better than Bonino. Kunin last year had 31 points. Bonino had 35. But Bonino is 32 years old, and Kunin's 22. I understand he doesn't play a good defensive game. Bonino's a much better defensive forward. And if that's what Bill Guerin was going for, I have no problem with it. But I'd have liked the Wild to have given Cunnin more of a chance. Overall, I don't mind what they did. Their logic makes sense. I'll give them a B- overall. The Canadiens didn't do much except the Josh Anderson trade. I spoke about that with the Blue Jackets. Good luck, Canadiens. You're going to need it. That's a big gamble. Not going to spend any more time on it. The Nashville Predators have had an interesting offseason so far. They saw Craig Smith go to Boston and Kyle Turris go to Edmonton. And they decided to spread the wealth around. They signed Mark Borowiecki, Nick Cousins, and Matthew Benning. I gotta say, I don't mind the moves. In terms of star power, yeah, the Predators lost a lot. But you know what? They added some solid two-way players. Borowiecki and Benning, I think, are going to be solid on that third defensive pair. Cousins is going to be a good third liner for him. I really don't mind what the Predators did here. Like I said, they lost a lot in star power, and offensively they may suffer. But defensively, I think they made it up. It's certainly a net negative, but I don't think they're going to be dreadful next year. I think they'll be back in the playoffs. Moving on now to the New Jersey Devils. They bought out Corey Schneider and replaced him with another Corey in Crawford. Good move. Crawford is a solid goalie. Nothing great, nothing terrible. He should be a solid backup to Mackenzie Blackwood. If they want to do a 1A, 1B setup, I'm okay with that. But Blackwood needs to get the majority of the starts. But the Devils did make a couple interesting trades. Obviously, I told you about Ryan Murray. He should be a solid top 4 defenseman for him. In a perfect world, he wouldn't be a top 4 defenseman, but the Devils really don't have any other options. It's Subban, Butcher, Severson, and then blank. It has to be Murray. But they did make an interesting move in trading for Andreas Janssen. I think that's how you pronounce it. They traded Joey Anderson for him. The little bit I've seen of Anderson, he struck me as a guy who had the potential to be in the NHL for a while. But Janssen has proven himself a little bit more. Last year, 21 points in 43 games. The year before that, he scored 20 goals. I don't mind this move for the Devils. They got better this offseason. Not by leaps and bounds. And they're certainly not a threat to do anything crazy in the playoffs. But they did the right thing in shoring up their holes. They're on the right track. They're not doing anything crazy. I'll skip over the Islanders because they haven't done anything. You'd think I'd be upset about that, but they didn't have any cap space. In fact, they still don't have cap space, so I don't mind them not doing anything. That brings us to the New York Rangers. They did a great job in trading Elias Anderson for a second rounder. I don't know how on earth they got the Kings to bite on that. Elias Anderson is not that good. This guy has done nothing in the NHL. literally nothing. The Rangers gave him some chances. He couldn't get it done. You want to tell me he still has potential? That's fine, but you don't give up a second rounder for someone like that. Great job by the Rangers there. They made some moves around the edges that I really don't want to talk about except for Jack Johnson. That made a ton of sense. They traded Mark Stahl, so they replaced him with a proven veteran in Johnson. Johnson never really got going in Pittsburgh, but he should be solid with the Rangers. He won't be expected to do much. I don't think 15 to 20 points is out of the question for him. The Rangers got rid of a veteran defenseman. They wanted to add another one. I don't mind it. Good offseason so far. That brings us now to the Ottawa Senators. And they've had an interesting offseason. They made a big trade to get Matt Murray. And it made a ton of sense because they needed a goalie. But the Senators are rebuilding. And they traded a solid prospect, from what I've heard, in John Gruden, and a second rounder for Murray. I understand you have to put a good product out there. You have to keep the fans interested. But this was a bizarre trade to me. The Senators won it. It just doesn't fit their MO. I mean, Murray's young, don't get me wrong. But I didn't think the Senators would be the team to trade for him. It's good. It just surprised me. Other than that, they made the trade for Josh Brown, which I wasn't crazy about, but, I can't bang tables over it. It was a fourth rounder. It's not like the Senators gave up Brady Tkachuk to make that trade happen. Eric Branson is a physical player. I like the idea of the Senators bringing in someone who can play the physical game to protect their young guns. All they gave up was a fifth rounder. It doesn't bother me that the Senators are making these trades. It's just surprising. It's hard to wrap my head around. Like Austin Watson. Watson's a guy who had potential, but has never been able to put it all together. He plays the game the right way. I like watching him play, but he should be better than he is. The Senators are giving up picks to get these guys. They need to take a step forward. I don't mind what they did this offseason. I'll give them a B. But they need to finish with at least 30 wins next year. Assuming that they play a full 82-game schedule. God only knows what's going to happen there. The two Pennsylvania teams, the Flyers and Penguins, saw a bunch of their guys leave and didn't really replace them. Bad job there. Not much I can say other than they've lost free agency. The Sharks did a good job in locking up Kevin Labanc. I like Labanc a lot. Really underrated player. Seems like he's going to be a solid second liner in this league. He'll put up 40 to 50 points a year. Great move in locking him up. They also did a good job in trading for Ryan Donato. Again, I like him. I think he can be a good player in this league. And Devin Dubnyk is a solid buy low candidate. All they gave up was a fifth rounder for him. I saw some people going crazy about that. calm down. It's a 5th rounder. Did you want someone better? Sure. I don't begrudge you for that. But Dubnyk is a solid bounce-back candidate. You have a right to be pessimistic if you are a Sharks fan, but I don't think Jones and Dubnyk will be bad in net. I really don't. I don't think they'll be great, but I don't think they'll be abysmal. I think they'll be average. That brings us to the St. Louis Blues. And what a weird time to be a Blues fan. You see Alex Pietrangelo not get re-signed. The captain, the fan favorite, the lifetime Blue, everyone's screaming bloody murder. And then you turn around and sign a younger player in Torrey Krug, who may even be better than Pietrangelo. You can't get upset at this if you're a Blues fan. You want to tell me you're sad to see Pietrangelo go? Fine. I have no problem with that. But don't get upset at bringing in Torrey Krug. He's a really, really good defenseman. I mean, he played well in that Cup final against the Blues. He ended up leading all players in the playoffs in assists with 16. Great job by the Blues. You lose Pietrangelo and you bring in Torrey Krug. It doesn't get much better than that. The Lightning are in cap hell. They really couldn't do much of anything. They're going to have a tough time repeating. That brings us now to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Another team that I thought was in cap hell, but it turns out they weren't. They signed TJ Brody, Wayne Simmons, and Zach Bogosian. Brody will do what they wanted Barry to do. The Barry trade didn't work out, but I guarantee you, the Brody signing will. I do think he'll bounce back now that he's back in a more familiar setting. He's from Ontario, so he probably grew up rooting for the Leafs. And there's less pressure on him there. Because, he's playing with guys like Morgan Riley and John Tavares, and Austin Matthews, and Mitch Marner, and Jake Muzzin. I really think Brody's gonna work out. And the Leafs got a lot more physical by bringing in Simmons and Bogosian. Simmons is a really, really good two-way player. Has a couple 60-point seasons to his name, a couple 30-goal seasons to his name. Has had a couple bad seasons, but I know he grew up rooting for the Leafs. I think that's a match made in heaven. I really, really do. The Leafs have skilled offensive players. Now they brought in some physical players in Simmons and Bogosian. This is something the Leafs have lacked for a while. A guy who can throw the body around. A guy who can protect all those stars. They haven't had that in a long time. Bogosian will be able to do that. He just won a Stanley Cup. The fit makes sense to me. He's not going to command a ton of ice time. For someone who's only 30 years old, he has a ton of experience. 12 years. I like that. I like that a lot. The Leafs brought in 3 guys in Brody, Simmons, and Bogosian who I think fit really well on their roster. The Canucks are the big losers of free agency so far. They lost Markstrom and Tanev. They really haven't replaced Tanev yet, and they decided to replace Markstrom with Braden Holtby. I don't think Holtby's a bad player. He had a bad year, but I think he can turn it around. I like Holtby, I really do. But he's not Jacob Markstrom. I think the Canucks are going to have a major regression next year. I wouldn't be surprised if they miss the playoffs altogether. The Golden Knights, again, it seems like they're on the verge of trading Nate Schmidt and bringing in Alex Pietrangelo, but at the time I'm recording this, nothing is official. However, I can talk about them trading Paul Stastny back to the Jets for Carl Dahlstrom and a 4th rounder. They're clearing cap space. They're trying to make a big splash in free agency. They had Cody Glass knocking on the door, so they could afford to trade Stastny. Stastny is a good second liner. Not great. He's not great anymore, but he's a solid second liner. I like the idea of him going back to the Jets. But the Golden Knights need to make a splash in free agency if they want to go back to making a deep playoff run. If they don't, then they're going to be out in the first round. Maybe the second round, depending on who they're matched up against. The Washington Capitals replaced their franchise stalwart in net with another team's franchise stalwart. Out with Braden Holtby, in with the king, Henrik Lundqvist. Look, Lundqvist can still play. I understand the goals against should be lower, but he hasn't gotten much help in front of him. And the Rangers were basically saying to him, we don't see you as the answer in net anymore. We want to go with Shesterkin and Georgiev. I understand why they did that. Lundqvist is 38 years old, but look. Lundqvist is a future Hall of Famer. Franchise legend. I thought he was treated kind of dirty by the Rangers at the end. And I think he'll do a good job in DC. I really, really do. The Capitals also went out and signed Justin Schultz away from the Penguins. Schultz has been injured the past couple seasons, but when healthy, you can count on him for, realistically, 30 points. Maybe 40 if you're lucky. Maybe. But I do like the fit of him in DC. I really do. They lost Radko Gudas. They replaced him with Schultz. They play a different style of hockey, but in overall production, I don't think the Capitals are going to lose much. They were net neutral in terms of the players that they added. But in terms of the coach, Peter Laviolette for Todd Reardon, huge, huge, huge gain. The Winnipeg Jets didn't do much except replace Cody Eakin with Paul Stastny. That is a huge improvement. There's no question about that. Stastny's a million times better than Eakin. I like the idea of him playing with Nick Ehlers and Patrick Laine, assuming Laine doesn't get traded. The Jets are set up well for the future. They really, really are. When other hockey stories break, I will talk about them on the regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show. You get those every weekday afternoon. New York Yankees offseason preview tomorrow night. Stephen Green's interview comes your way Wednesday afternoon. He wrote a book about 24 Negro Leaguers that he thinks should be in the Hall of Fame. It's going to be a long conversation, but it's going to be a really fun one. New York Jets instant recaps right after their game is over. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that I don't have a monkey on my back. I have a zoo.